everybody, welcome back. So I'm going to take a couple of different videos and audios that I've brought things up before and try to congeal them together to discuss something that I think is really important for us in benzo withdrawal. And I'm doing it by audio because, quite frankly, I'm going to need a few notes in front of me, and I don't want to keep looking away from the screen. And I'm not tech savvy enough to be able to kind of cut and edit to make it look pretty. So I'm going to do an audio instead. So in your experience of benzo withdrawal, whether that's a tolerance withdrawal while you're on it, while that's in a tapering, coming off it, a cold turkey, a protracted withdrawal, if you're having experiences of depression, whether that's kind of anhedonia, a loss in pleasure in things, or more major depressive disorder type symptoms, if you're having experiences of different forms of anxiety, whether that, and that can take the form of a more generalized anxiety, it can take the form of agoraphobia, monophobia, all different types of phobias, intrusive thoughts, depersonalization, derealization, just to name a few. Those fit under the umbrella of what we call generalized anxiety disorder. If you're experiencing issues related to maybe you're pre-diabetic now as a result of this, or having trouble with your glucose or your insulin, a lot of people will talk about having extreme adrenaline surges after eating or being unable to move after they're eating. If you're having issues around autoimmune difficulties that are cropping up, chronic pain, whether that be nerve, bone, or muscular pain. Metabolic syndrome, this is again where we kind of gain weight around our middles and we have issues with cholesterol, that sort of thing. Issues around our cardiovascular system. Issues with our thyroid. A lot of times in benzo withdrawal, they're bumping up and down and kind of all over the place. That's why it's kind of hard to diagnose a thyroid condition in this, because a lot of times it's bouncing around. If you're experiencing issues related to your gastrointestinal tract, IBS type symptoms, as we all know, lots of people experience lots of problems with food intolerances and as well as just pain, stomach pain, IBS type stuff, and also reduced tolerance to stress and frustration. If any or all of these things speak to you, I think that we need to really be looking at our stress response system, and that includes our limbic system, which I've talked about before, especially our amygdala and our hypothalamus, and I'm going to go back to that, as well as our hippocampus is part of that. I'll come back to all that. And also something that I haven't talked a lot about, which is what's called our Hpa axis, which is, again, really, it is our stress response system. It's the hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenal axis, okay? So a lot of big words, and I'm going to try to stay away from as many of the big words as possible, just because that's what I have to do to learn, and try to break this down as simply as I can. So I want you to imagine all of this is our stress response system, and this is my understanding of it. I am not giving clinical or medical advice. I'm just simply sharing what I'm learning as I'm going, and if it's helpful, great. So if I think about it and I line it up, I look at it across a trajectory, and I kind of start it with the amygdala. It moves into the hypothalamus. The hippocampus is kind of like right there in the middle. And then it moves into the HPA axis. This is kind of how I envision our stress response system. And one day when I'm more tech savvy, I will find a way to make a video where I'm drawing these things out. But let's go back to the amygdala, which I've talked about many times before. Okay, let's start there. Our amygdala is the most primitive part of our brain. From an evolutionary perspective, it was there to protect us. It still is. Back then, it was there to protect us from, the saber-toothed tiger or the bear, and hopefully most of us are not having to grapple with saber-toothed tigers or bears. And hopefully most of us listening to this are not in war-torn countries right now, are actively engaged in that, and we're fortunate enough to not be dealing with that level of kind of imminent chronic danger. But the amygdala is there to sound the alarm. Okay, so the amygdala its job is to sense danger, and it's meant to protect us, right? And it would rather be wrong it would rather sound the alarm 1,000 times. It would rather say danger, danger, danger 1,000 times and be wrong 999 of those times to get that one time where it was right to save us. So if we think about it like that fire alarm that's going off, right? And that fire alarm doesn't necessarily know if it's just a test that maybe the apartment complex we're in they're running systemically. It doesn't know if maybe there's something burning on the stove, but we're safe, or if there's a real fire, okay? But it's sounding this alarm. So it's going to sound, okay? And that's all its job, that's its entire job, is to have the emotional impact, the, oh my God, this is danger, this is danger. And it sends that signal to our command center, which is our hypothalamus, right? That hypothalamus's job is to say, no, remember we got that email that they were going to run the fire alarms today? We're not in any danger. It's annoying, but let's sit down and have our soup and watch our TV show and it'll pass, okay? So our hypothalamus, it runs our whole endocrine system, but it also is responsible for our autonomic nervous system. Our autonomic nervous system is our sympathetic nervous system, which is our fight, flight, freeze response, and our parasympathetic nervous system, which is what I was just describing. It's our rest and digest. Everything's okay. So the fire alarm goes off. The amygdala has done its job. The hypothalamus now has to do its job, and it says, nope, we're not in any danger. Somebody just lit a match next to the fire alarm, and it accidentally set it off. No real danger. We don't need to evacuate. It sounds the parasympathetic nervous system, and we calm down. What happens in benzo withdrawal, or in people that have anxiety conditions or have been in other types of situations where the limbic system has been injured or is worn out and damaged, is the amygdala is doing its job, but the hypothalamus is saying, oh my God, you're right, there is a fire, okay? And so for every time those 1,000 times those alarms are sounding, the command center is saying, danger, 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 you were right. What do we do now? Okay, well, what does it do? It signals to the adrenal glands that it needs to secrete adrenaline. Adrenaline is one of our stress hormones, and its job is to affect mostly our muscular and our respiratory systems to get us motivated and immobilized to fight or flee. And so it's kind of like why you'll hear like the little grandma suddenly could pick up the car to lift it off her grandchild, or the person who couldn't, was barely walking, all of a sudden was able to dart out of the way. It mobilizes very quickly our ability to do this. And it's happening very, very fast. Okay, none of this is happening in our conscious awareness necessarily. So for example, imagine, I've told you this example before, you've stepped off the curb. You're now about to walk across the street. A car turns the corner and is coming 90 miles an hour. Your amygdala says danger. Your hypothalamus says you're right. Shoots off the adrenal glands to shoot off the adrenaline. You are able to jump very quickly back up onto that curb out of danger. Now, you're not standing in the street thinking, wow, that green car. Wait, is that a green car? No, that looks more like a blue car. That blue car, no, it could be a red car, sure seems to be coming at me quite fast, like maybe 80 miles an hour, maybe 90 miles an hour. Is that car going to hit me? No, if we were doing that, we'd be dead, right? So this is all happening in nanoseconds when it's all working properly, right? It mobilizes us and we're able to jump off the curb. Hopefully we get out of harm's way. We're able to assess, okay, we're out of harm's way. We're still pretty worked up for a few minutes, right? But hopefully things calm down. In a normal system, things calm back down. Everything kind of goes back into rest. And we can go back to normal, go back to our daily lives. When our limbic systems are injured, and a lot of times what's happening to us in benzo withdrawal is things aren't calming down. Okay, so now the adrenaline's been kicked off. Danger, danger, danger. And if it then moves into the next step, which is where it activates what I'm calling the Hpa axis. And the Hpa axis is our hypothalamus, again, our pituitary and our adrenals. And, when you think about the role of again, this HPA axis. It's again more of our stress response system. It's meant to regulate our metabolism and our immune responses, and again, our nervous system responses in terms of how we move forward in this. So let's just take one example of the HPA axis. So let's say, for example, let's just stay with my example of you've stepped into the street. Danger, danger, danger. The hypothalamus has said, yes, it is. It's told the adrenals to shoot off adrenaline. It's pushed you to jump onto the curb. But now we realize it wasn't just one car. For some reason, it's a series of cars careening at crowds of people, right? So our adrenaline is going. It's kicked off now our HPA axis. And one of the things that happens in our HPA axis, and I'm not going to use all the fancy words, but the hypothalamus secretes what's called CRF and AVP, which are meant to create the ability to secrete what's called ACTH. And I will try my best to say what ACTH is because it's important. It's the adrenocorticotropic hormone. You don't need to remember that, but basically the goal and the role of ACTH is to create our second stress hormone, cortisol. Okay, so ACTH, when it's activated by our HPA axis being activated, it says, okay, it's time for us to make some cortisol. So let me just go back and say a little bit about cortisol and adrenaline, the way I think about them. I think about them, unfortunately, this is like a bad pun here, but like Xanax and Valium. Adrenaline is meant to come on fast and quick and then leave our system pretty fast and quick. It's meant to come in, give a heavy punch, get those muscles and respiratory systems activated to get us out of danger, and hopefully leave, okay? Cortisol comes in a little bit more delayed, so it's a little further down that stress response system. Again, this is all, again, happening not in hours, but in moments, okay? But it's further down the line, so it comes in a little bit more delayed, and it's meant to stick around a little bit longer to ensure that if we need to be in fight or flight, we have what we need to stay there. So it sticks around a little bit longer. It's like the Valium, okay? Adrenaline's like the Xanax, in and out. The cortisol is like the Valium, comes on a little bit strong, comes in a little bit slower, takes a little bit more of a delayed reaction, and sticks around a little bit longer. And the role of cortisol, a primary function, is really to increase our glucose and help with kind of fat and protein metabolism to keep us fueled to stay in fight or flight if we need to. So it's feeding us what we need to be able to stay in a sustained protective mode, okay? It modulates our immune and our brain, our immune system and our brain to manage stress. This is, again, all happening simultaneously. And initially what also happens with cortisol is initially it works as an anti-inflammatory, and it also releases endorphins to where it reduces the perception of pain. This is why a lot of times people who get cut or get shot or get hit, they don't necessarily in the moment feel it, okay? It's a result of the cortisol releasing those endorphins to reduce the perception of pain, and it acts as an anti-inflammatory. The problem is that, you know, in a healthy system, this cortisol would come in, it would do this job, it would increase the glucose, it would feed all of our systems, it would allow us to stay in fight or flight and get safe. It would act as an anti-inflammatory, it would act as reduce pain, and then it would begin to dissipate. And we would then begin to actually realize, like, oops, I am injured, and then the body would release what it needed to those particular part of the bodies that are injured. The problem is that in our state, or in many people's state that stay in this very sensitized system and in a chronic state of high stress and high danger, is that the cortisol and the adrenaline, everything is staying heightened and it's staying longer than it's meant to stay, okay? And this has an impact on all of our symptoms. Why? Because exactly what I've said before, our bodies are a soup, okay? Nothing is acting as a unique entity, as nothing's acting unilaterally, okay? Everything is working together. It all feeds off each other. You can see how our adrenaline, right, then signals the hypothalamus to go further and to secrete the cortisol. When we're in these fight or flight responses, we're suppressing serotonin and dopamine and GABA, increasing glutamate. All these things are working in conjunction with each other. All of our hormones, our stress hormones, our sexual hormones, all of our neurohormones, all of our neurotransmitters, our glycine, our acetylcholine, our dopamine, our serotonin, our norepinephrine. Again, as one thing's affected, everything's affected. And this goes back to that point that I've made many times, which I think, again, we are like a pot of soup on the stove. And we've put salt in our soup by adding a benzo. Once you've put the salt in, you cannot reach in that pot of soup and draw out just the salt. Without it, it's now intermingled with every other part of that soup, right? This is why I think it's interesting that there's this belief that we can somehow reach in and take out this Xanax, Klonopin, Ativan, whatever it is, and we're not going to necessarily disrupt the rest of these systems that have been affected by this, okay? And so I think, again, thinking about us as soup and all of these things working together, okay? So as we stay in these chronic stress states, this goes back to my question earlier, which is who's, kind of struggling with anything from anxiety to depression to metabolic syndromes to chronic pain to autoimmune to thyroid issues to IBS, to reduce tolerance to stress and pain. Most of us that are struggling in benzo withdrawal are dealing with this. And so it gives us a place to look at. Why? Why are we feeling this? I think we're feeling this because we have basically a malfunctioning stress response syndrome that has gotten, acute hits and chronic hits as we're going through this. For any of those of you who've been in what we call kind of acute withdrawal, where, for me, that's happened a couple of times in my withdrawal process where I see it as more acute. I'm definitely not functional. And it's terrifying, right? And in that acute state, I become more scared. My perception of my state is I'm more terrified. So I always talk about Claire Weeks, and I'm going to speak about her again because she wasn't talking about benzo withdrawal, but she was talking about people with sensitized nervous systems, which is in essence what we have. And she was talking about part of how we develop a sensitized nervous system. Now, I think how we develop it in benzo withdrawal is two-part. I think there's certainly chemical reactions that are going on. Absolutely, we know benzos directly affect GABA and glutamate, which of course then affect dopamine and serotonin and norepinephrine. It affects how we respond to progesterone fluctuations and estrogen fluctuations. It certainly responds to, because our limbic systems are injured, they're covered in GABA receptors, which are not working. Our limbic system is malfunctioning, which highly correlates to all of our endocrine system, as well as our cortisol and our adrenaline stress hormones. So again, all of these things are happening and all of these things are affected. But a place where I think we can maybe affect a little bit of change in us is thinking again about Claire Weeks' point of when we have sensitized nervous systems, in essence what's happening is we have become afraid of the state we are in. And I don't know about you guys, but I know for me, for sure in benzo withdrawal, I have become afraid of the state I am in. I am afraid of losing my mind. I am afraid of when I was acute, how depressed I was, how anxious I was, how agitated I was. I didn't have full-blown akathisia, but I shook and I had a tremor. I wasn't thinking clearly. When we're flooded with stress hormones, cortisol and adrenaline, our wise minds, our rational minds are not in gear. We are thinking erratically. And so when I think about another part of this limbic system that's injured is this hippocampus. And we don't talk about this part as much, but I'd like to. Okay, so the hippocampus is really the part of our brain that stores emotional memory. Okay? And so we're creating emotional memories while we're in benzo withdrawal. But what a lot of us are also experiencing, and I know this has been a big problem for me, has been as I look back and remember things in my life, I'm remembering them in a distorted way. I have a hard time calling up a lot of positive memory. There are things I can think back on, and they feel distorted and sinister and scary and filled with terror and dread, future and past. But certainly we're talking now about memory and creating memory. So, you have a perceptual experience. You have something going on in your life, right? And the amygdala is kind of the emotion that's surrounding it. Is it a positive memory and we're just fine and we're in that rest and digest state and we're having a wonderful time at the beach and everything's great? Or are we being flooded with, again, that amygdala sending off those stress hormones, which is kind of burning, okay, that memory with adrenaline kind of into our brains? And I think that's what happens with benzo withdrawal a lot, is that as we're encountering people, places, and things, we're doing so with this heightened stress hormones, and it's burning these kind of memories and associations as terrifying. And this is where I think we can start to make some false associations. What I mean by that is, we go to the store, we're in benzo withdrawal, we're not feeling well, we go to the store, and we get overstimulated, and it creates what feels like a panic attack. Suddenly, we don't want to go back to that store. Why? Was the store dangerous? No, but we've made an association of that feeling that we had with that place, okay? And so now we've attributed fear to that store. Or we've been driving and we've gotten overstimulated, right? Because we have a very sensitized nervous system. Maybe we've gotten overstimulated with the responsibility of driving our child on a freeway. We begin to panic and our muscles tighten and we start to get tunnel vision. We feel like we're going to pass out. Okay, now we don't want to drive anymore, right? Was the driving in itself dangerous? No, it was the feeling we had while we were driving. We've become afraid of that state that we were in. This is how our world starts to become very, very small, okay? So with stress being perceptual, again, we can begin to think about how can we lower our perception of stress while we're in benzo withdrawal? And I'll talk about that in a second. But let me go back to the hippocampus one more time. One way that I think about what's happened to me, at least in this, and you might be able to relate, is remember the old card catalogs in the library? So before there were computers, there were the old card catalogs. And if you wanted to find a book, you'd have to find the right drawer and then look for the right number and find that title, and everything was organized in this card catalog system. Well, I imagine what's happened to me in benzo withdrawal is that somebody has come and picked up my card catalog cabinet and thrown it up in the air, and all of my information, all of my memories, all of my perceptions, all of my feelings, all of my thoughts, everything has gone all over the floor. Some things have hidden under tables, some things have slid into the hidden underneath a shelf. Some things are turned over, some things are upright, some things are stacked. And as I'm trying to make sense of what's going on in my present, I'm also getting flooded with potentially memories. Again, all of this information, but it's not organized any longer. Things don't make sense. And when things don't make sense, we start making false associations, right? So all of a sudden I'm picking up, I'm thinking about that time when I was 8. But I'm also right now currently flooded with so much fear and terror that now I'm kind of feeling that what was a one-time, maybe potentially benign memory, but I'm funneling it through this now, this state of terror. Or I'm picking up this memory and this card of a really bad time in my life with another card that wasn't so bad, and I'm making this association, and suddenly I'm joining people and places and things together that aren't really joined together. And again, this is how we make these kind of false associations that feel very, very real. And This is again how sometimes intrusive thoughts can kind of come in and get solidified, right? We have a thought because we have a million thoughts in our sensitized system. Well, we have a million thoughts in our normal systems. In a sensitized nervous system, something comes up and it's a distressing thought. We think about something sexual or something violent, and it scares us. And suddenly, we have this reaction. Well, now we've coded that person or anything about that person with that feeling, and now we've now gelled together and kind of cemented and burned this intrusive thought. Oh my God, I better not ever think about that person again. Oh, I better not think about this again. Or oh, and we start building these associations, and they're false. Okay, so imagine our entire informational systems are basically upended. The way we process emotion, the way we in our current state, but also our whole perception of the past, potentially the future, and certainly our current state. Everything's distorted. So I remember when I was in my acute part of this, and I was still trying to work as I was getting acute, and I realized I could no longer work as a clinician, and I had to walk away from my practice, and it was very, very difficult. I miss my clients desperately and dearly, but I was having such an added stress of having to hold them in mind and be responsible for them. When I was able to let that go, as depressing as that was, which was another layer, it alleviated over time a little bit of stress. And as it alleviated a little bit of that stress, I was able to perceive my withdrawal with a little bit more creativity and be able to be a little bit more curious about it, okay? When I was just in my withdrawal feeling nothing but acute stress and being terrified of it, I couldn't think about it. I couldn't try to understand what's going on. But as I was able to find a way to alleviate a little bit of stress, reduce our stressors in our withdrawal, whatever that is, whether that's taking better care of ourselves, meditating, breathing, moderate exercise, whether it's getting ourselves out of a bad relationship, whether it's informing our families and loved ones what's going on so that the expectations are more realistic of us, whether that's unfortunately having to leave jobs sometimes, whatever we can do to reduce the stress. What I have found is in doing that, it's allowed the other parts of my brain to kick in a little bit. And that's when I started to get curious about what is this thing I'm going through, and what is this thing these other hundreds of thousands of people are going through. What can I learn about it? Because having information matters, right? If I know my heart is palpating and I'm not having a heart attack, and I know that, then I'm not going to worry so much about the heart attack, right? If I don't have that data and I don't know why my heart is palpating, I'm going to go to that worst case scenario. First of all, we have a negativity bias as human beings anyway, right? Again, that was adaptive. We want to assume the worst so that we can be protected from the tigers and the bears. But we still have this negativity bias in us as humans, and we tend to operate from worst case scenario. We can catastrophize. So one way that we cannot catastrophize is to reduce that stress and get curious about, well, let me better understand this. I actually had that checked out by the cardiologist, okay? And I'm okay. Now, I want to speak to that a little bit, because this limbic system of ours, our amygdala and all these parts I'm talking about, they're more primitive. They don't really respond to language, which is why we come across in something like benzo withdrawal as being quite not reassurable. It's why, am I going to be okay? Am I going to be okay? Am I going to survive? Am I different than everybody else? Will I be the one that doesn't make it? So this is where I really, for myself, have had to learn I have to show my system that I'm not in danger, right? So as much as I don't like it, I have to take graduated steps towards exposures. And I'm not talking about making things worse and flooding our systems with adrenaline and cortisol. I'm saying the adrenaline and cortisol is already there, and I'm going to try to sit with it while I show myself I'm okay. So if I can drive with somebody around the block, if I can't drive, if I can walk with somebody into the grocery store and just walk around the aisles for a little while and realize that the supermarket's not dangerous. if little things that we can do, there's a benzo coach out there that I've talked to who got so agoraphobic and stuck in his withdrawal that he couldn't walk to the mailbox. And that was his task each day, was to walk to the mailbox and feel the adrenaline and the cortisol coming, but to show his body that he could survive it. He wasn't going to die. It wasn't going to kill him. The mailbox was not a grizzly bear. It was a teddy bear. But in our distress, our perception that sets off this stress response system, everything gets distorted and all our teddy bears become grizzly bears. So I think, again, this is where we can recognize that information can help us, okay? The more I understand, this is my stress system that is trying to help me and it's not working very well. Thank you very much for trying to help me, but I am going to continue to try to live my day as best I can so that I can show my body that there's not a fire, okay? It was somebody lit a cigarette nearby, somebody lit a match, but the house isn't on fire. And the more that I can show my body this, I'm speaking its language. We have to be careful with this in benzo withdrawal, right? Because we're already existing, a lot of us, in this chronic state of stress. And so, how this also can play out, for example, like with cortisol, a lot of times people will say, it's interesting because, I feel better in the morning. Most people feel worse because that's where the surge of cortisol is. That surge of cortisol in our tin can of a sensitized nervous system, we feel everything, right? So some people will say, I feel more depressed in the morning. Well, that's because sometimes in our depleted stress response systems, we've stopped responding to the cortisol. And so we don't necessarily feel it as that glucose surge. We just feel more depressed and depleted. What I find for most people is they go in and out of this. Sometimes it's terror and fear, and sometimes it's depletion and depression. And I think that's the kind of the waxing and waning, the ups and downs, the windows and waves of this. Sometimes we have moments where we get it right, and our systems get it right. And everything kind of lines up for a minute. All the neurotransmitters line up, all the hormones line up, and we feel kind of intact. And then it kind of goes away again. Okay, so this is a really complicated discussion. I hope I haven't made it more complicated, but I certainly want to, again, think about the fact that we don't have a lot of control over the fact that from just a neurochemical standpoint, we're a little bit of a shitstorm, quite frankly, and we don't have much control over that. To where stress can be somewhat perceptual, and we can think about what do we have control over, our attitude, the information, what we're understanding about what we're going through. Success stories, again, a lot of times we have to keep reading them because we're not very reassurable, but a lot of times embedded in them is information about what this is. So as we know, this is our body trying to reach homeostasis, and as it's doing so, it's sending all of this stuff into disarray, but it's really trying to work on our behalf. And how can we reduce stress? How can we increase our parasympathetic nervous system, our rest and digest? You can look on YouTube. There's some good vagus nerve exercises. Some people have some luck with working on their vagus nerve to increase the parasympathetic response, which is the rest and digest. Meditation, breathing exercises, mild exercise. And for me, I know for me personally, information. The more I can understand why my brain's doing this, why my head feels like this, why is my stomach doing this, why is my heart palpitating, why are my thoughts so crazy, I can then try to show it something different while at the same time, working to kind of calm myself down a little bit. I hope this was helpful on some level. If there's any questions, anything I can do to help explain it, I'll do my best. Thanks, guys.